Welcome to another episode of Exercise Matters with me, Randall Cooper.
And me, Mick Hughes.
Support for today's episode comes from Premax Performance Skincare. If you're active, you focus on strength, endurance and recovery. But what about your skin? Sweat, friction and the elements take a toll. That's where Premax comes in. High-performance skincare made for high-performance people. From recovery creams to anti-chafe balms, massage creams to exercise-specific barrier creams, we help your skin go the distance. Keep your skin as fit as your body with Premax. Available now at premax.co.
And support for today's episode also comes from Learn.physio. Health professionals, are you staying ahead of the game? Learn.physio brings you cutting-edge education from world-class experts in sports and musculoskeletal medicine. Online courses, hands-on practicals and expert resources, all backed by the latest evidence and designed to fit into your busy schedule. To be your best, learn from the best. Get started today at Learn.physio. Well, good morning, mate.
Good morning, Mick. It's great to chat with you again. I'm excited about today's episode. It's something that it's been on the periphery kind of my radar is probably the best way of saying it. For a while, being a physio, but clearly, like we're talking about creatine. So it's something that I experimented a little bit when I was in my 20s, and I was right into lifting and muscle gains and trying to look as good as I could.
How'd you go?
On the beach.
Did you look good in the mirror?
I look better than I do now, that's for sure.
What was your experience with it? What was, what'd you feel?
I definitely noticed a difference. I noticed that, and I'm sure we're going to talk about this as we go along today, is that it attracts water into your muscles. So I did feel within the first even 10 days or 2 weeks that my muscles just felt bigger, for a better expression. Fuller is probably the best way of describing it. I did feel like I could train just that little bit harder as well.
Yep.
So, yeah, I did it for a year or two, but these days I haven't. But I know you've got a different experience, so I'm interested in that.
Yeah, I've come at it from two different points. In my life, I was probably an early adopter, probably about the same time as you. I was about the same. I'm a few years behind you, but late 90s, when I was a 17-year-old, I was hitting the gym, trying to get fit and strong and be explosive for basketball. Heard about this magical product that could improve your explosiveness and improve your power, and blindly started taking it, not really sort of knowing any science behind it. So thankfully the last 30 years I have passed and I haven't grown 2 heads or 3 arms and morphed into something. And the evidence over the years has been really overwhelmingly positive, which we'll talk about. So yeah, I had some great experiences with it, 20 odd years ago. I fell away from the weights room for probably a couple of decades, to be honest, and just rediscovered the joys of lifting at the back end of last year and started taking it again and really enjoyed the process. And it's obviously I've got only a one person experience here, but I did find that taking it enabled me to back up well and progress through my lifting loads really well. So I've had some positive experiences from a lifting point of view in the last couple of years as well. So yeah, I've got nothing really bad to say about it, to be honest.
Have you discussed it with any of your patients? I mean, is it something where it's been a topic of conversation in your clinical practice, or is it you tend to think that it's more something that's discussed in the gym and amongst mates than it is with allied health professionals?
Yeah, I actually have lately, because I've had some patients come to me lately asking about peptides and all sorts of weird, wonderful, less evidence-based products to be taking and supplements to be taking. And my conversation steers them back to the things that are well known and probably have got better bang for buck, so to speak. So be it protein intake and making sure that they get adequate protein intake, and then discuss creatine as well, because there's some good evidence there for strength gains, power gains, and probably less potentially harmful than the lesser known peptides or illegal substances that sometimes get brought up in conversation in the body, people who are doing bodybuilding as well, such as steroids and whatnot, and even people who are trying to take all sorts of things like turmeric and olive oil, leaf extracts, and and glucosamines, and all of those kind of 1%ers that there's probably a loose evidence base to support. If you got an endless money pit and you want to take those things, go for it. But I think there's some better bang for buck. And I have been talking about protein and creatine quite a lot more lately with my ACL patients who are needing to maintain muscle mass and importantly, build a bit of muscle mass post ACL surgery. So yeah, I do.
Yeah, I think it's something that the public awareness of it is increased enormously. I mean, I think back to early in my career, let's say 20 years ago, I don't think I had one conversation about supplements, diet, any of those things when it came to, and we're in the business generally of kind of building and strengthening muscle. So the way that's changed and the way it's been put on the map with creatine, protein, and all those other supplements is something I think that the public has got a better awareness of. And for
Yeah.
those, physiotherapists and other health professionals that are listening into this podcast, I think that it's a good thing to educate yourself on these supplements because I think that the questions on them will continue to kind of come for a while.
Yeah, well, just the ability to get knowledge these days is so easy to get. It used to be a lot slower. The knowledge translation used to be a lot slower, and our patients were probably less savvy in getting that information. Whereas now, so much things are coming at us so much faster. So keeping yourself equipped with some best available evidence is good. And certainly creatine and protein intake have been hot topics of conversation. Not only we've talked about protein, but you go across a lot of YouTube channels that are looking at health or social media channels and podcasts, they're talking about creatine. So it's good to stay informed and up to date. So probably without further ado, we better dive in, hey?
Let's talk about it. You want to give us an overview of what it is?
Yeah, I'll give everyone a bit of a bird's eye view of what it is. So creatine is certainly one of the more popular supplements available out there. There is certainly a strong evidence base to support its use. A lot of the work has been done largely around power, strength, power, and maintaining lean muscle mass. Less has been done looking at endurance-based athletes, but we will talk a little bit about that today. And some athletes that may be able to use creatine as a ergogenic aid for that. But what's also emerging and pretty exciting is for its ability in our older populations to improve our quality of life and help us live better, healthier lives, and its positive effect on cognitive health, brain health, and bone mass, and obviously avoids things like sarcopenia and muscle later on in life as well. So it's not just for the young, fit people and the power-based, anaerobic-based athletes. There's certainly some emerging evidence to support its use in our older population as well, which is pretty cool.
Yeah, I'm really glad we're going to talk about that because, I mean, the perception, I think, for a lot of people over the medium term, let's say over the last 10 or 20 years, has been that it's a supplement for gym bros, and that, it's only about kind of getting big and looking good like I wanted to back when I was 25.
Yep.
But now, as we've found with a lot of the things that we've been talking about, a lot of those things that are have borne themselves, whether it's high level athletics or in the gym with the people who are very serious about it, has much wider health implications, and creatine's definitely that as well. So it's good that we're talking about it.
Yeah, absolutely. So we'll talk about what it is and how it works biologically and physiologically, and where it stores, how it's come from. We'll talk about that, and we'll get into that straight away. But also, basically, to set the scene, we're going to talk about it in its effects on resistance training, anaerobic training, endurance training, in brain health, and then finally wrap up with some recommended dosages and just some looks at some of the safety concerns and myths and whatnot.
Sounds good.
So creatine itself is actually a naturally occurring product within the body. It's mainly produced in the liver, kidneys, and pancreas, and usually comes through the diet, comes externally in through the diet, through red meat and seafood. 95% of the body's creatine is stored in our skeletal muscle, with the remainder stored in the brain and other tissues, so a very small amount held elsewhere. How it works is pretty interesting, and makes sense that it's really helpful in our power-based and anaerobic-based athletes, because how it works in the body is that creatine is converted to phosphocreatine, and phosphocreatine plays a critical role in cellular energy metabolism by rapidly regenerating ATP. Now, you talked about ATP a few podcasts back, and it's basically our primary energy currency. So it's our primary energy source, especially during short bursts of high intensity activity. So it kind of makes sense that that's where we're probably seeing a lot of benefit there. And by maintaining ATP availability within our body, the creatine helps delay fatigue and improve performance that require quick, powerful movements. So it's pretty cool. And then beyond that, it can also to help with energy regeneration, although we just talked about energy regeneration, but also can enable the body to delay muscular fatigue because it's got a quick energy turnover. So it can sort of delay that fatigue. And also too, because it can enhance calcium reuptake, it kind of assists in muscle contraction and relaxation. So it's got some great all-round use, but as we said, and as we talked about, its main uses in our anaerobic and power-based athletes. It's mostly outside of our diet. It's often taken in a powder form via creatine monohydrate, as it's commonly known, and bought online or in our favorite nutritional shops.
Yeah, that's I haven't seen anything other than a powder out on the markets. I assume that's where. And have you? And you taking it recently? Is it a powder? I haven't taken it for ages. I'm just trying to refresh myself. Is a powder you put in like a drink? Is that right?
Yeah. It's mostly. So back in the day, I was told to take it with orange juice for some reason. I still haven't been able to figure out why. Maybe something to do with the vitamin C, I assume.
Or it tastes like crap.
Yeah, maybe. I've recently just been taking it with water. I know my wife, who's heavily in taking our protein and creatine at the moment. She likes to mix it in with her protein powders. I honestly don't believe, and for what I've read and researched in this podcast, I don't believe there's a superior way to take it in terms of the liquid form, but it does come in a powder, whether or not you take it with water, whether or not you take it with orange juice, coffee, tea, whatever. I think it's just a simple fact of getting it into your bloodstream and into your muscles. That's the end game. But yeah, powder form is the most commonly way to ingest it.
And Mick, in your research, and also just your own kind of usings of it, I know that when we talk about protein a couple of times on this podcast, and we're going to do a proper episode on it at one point, I'm sure, but some of the dietitians, the sports nutritionists will kind of say, like, if you've got a really well balanced diet and you eat a lot of red meat, etc., like you'll get the protein that you need from whole foods and food. You don't need the supplement. What about creatine? Do you know that can you get enough of it from, like, if you eat enough food, for a better expression, or is it that you can't? And if you want the gains that you need to get, or you need to take the supplement in powder form?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I actually didn't come across that in my research. That's something I need to follow up with, but really good question. I'll get back to you on that one, mate, because it's a really valid point, because we do know it's there. It exists in our body. We can get it via other means, like, when we take multivitamins, are we just topping it up to our 100% levels and everything else being excreted as waste? And is creatine the same? I will follow that up with you, mate, and we'll report back on the upcoming episodes to make sure our listeners are fully informed.
Sorry to put you on the spot there, buddy.
No, you have. You absolutely have thrown me a curveball, and like all good responders, we should say, I don't know, and I'll get back to you on that one.
Okay, great.
But when we better dive into the evidence. Otherwise, it's going to be 40 minutes, and we know we don't like to run over time on this show. So kicking off, we're going to look at resistance training. And so I found a systematic review. It was actually a really recent systematic review from 2023 by Wang and colleagues. Now, this one was a meta-analysis systematic review, 23 high-quality randomized control trials, all involving healthy adults under the age of 50, and comparing a group of people who did resistance training with creatine and comparing them against a group of people who did the training without creatine or taking a placebo. And they looked at maximal strength gains in upper body and lower body over a period of time between 1 month and 3 months, so 4 to 12 weeks. Key findings were pretty remarkable in that, on average, the creatine groups compared to the placebo groups gained an extra 4.4 kilos, or roughly 10 pounds, in their upper body lifts over that period of time compared to placebos. And for lower body strength, the gains were even more pronounced, equating to 11.3 kilos, or about 25 pounds, compared to the placebo groups. And they were consistent, these results, over the 23 high quality randomized controlled trials. The results were consistent. So this is a really powerful message here, that upper body and lower body strength gains over a 3-month period, as little as 1, but as maximum as 3, as most studies tend to sort of stick to, the gains were really significant.
It is extraordinary. I think that when I looked at those numbers, I said, this can't be right. And I thought, oh, is this just some dinky die kind of study that was done? Not that you pick one of those out, Mick. So that was the first, that was one of the first green flags for me. Then the second green flag for me was that it's a meta-analysis and systematic review. So this is a pooling of data. So, you put that in context that, we've spoken about our weights before, but let's say you're an 80 kilogram, average 80 kilogram kind of person.
Yep.
And in 3 months, you can put on essentially 15 kilograms of muscle by supplementing with creatine, which is like 20% extra of your body weight. Like that is just off the chart.
Yep. Yeah. I think this is probably something I wonder, because it's probably something that's not directly clear, is the strength gains as opposed to body weight. That would probably be the thing. So say it's the squat performance as opposed to if you're an 80 kilo person, you're putting on 15 kilos. There definitely would be an increase in muscle mass, no doubt about that. But I think it's relating to, and now that I reread this text, it's strength gains. So not body weight. So just make that one clear. Okay. But nevertheless, it's significant improvements in strength and performance. So your strength to body weight ratio is improving significantly, which is going to tremendously improve the ability to jump, to push, to pull, to all these important sporting-based endeavors.
Okay, my bad. I thought that was actually kind of body weight and muscle weight rather than the strength gains. But even
strength gains,
that still is very impressive.
To put on that like the amount of load to progressively, like a 12 kilo strength gain in strength over that period of time, and it's a big body of people too, right? It's under 50, so we're looking at 18 to 50-year-olds. There's going to be our young, healthy males and females are going to probably have a much more bigger gain there in their squat performance or their deadlift performance, for example, just because they've just got these healthy, surging hormones that are helpful in improving muscle mass in those younger years. As we get a bit older, we're getting through to our 40s and 50s, our ability to sort of build that muscle is going to be reduced. But across that spectrum, it's a wonderful improvement over a period of time just by having that on board and making it stronger. Is that it's comparing it to placebo. So yeah, it's a powerful and positive effect there, which is really cool.
Yeah, impressive.
There is a big caveat here, and once again, we've talked about this a few times on a few different podcasts and a few different topics, is that the females, once again, were underrepresented in this study, in this systematic review, or the 23 studies, in fact. So the results of this systematic review showed that males definitely, because they were the overriding presence in the data set, they showed significant strength gains for creatine use in upper body, lower body. The females that were pooled into this data set, they actually didn't show significantly improved benefits in upper body, lower strength, but this is the reason why. Only 2 out of the 23 studies focused solely on women, and those other 21 had very few female participants. So it is hard for us to say, yes, females will benefit from this, and we can't sort of make these generalized sweeping claims that they can. But it's also we also need to appreciate that females, once again, are underrepresented. But I think from what we have seen across the data is that there's no harms in taking it. So just because this evidence doesn't sort of scream out that females must take it, it's because of the underrepresentation. It seems to be the problem. So it's not to say females can't take it, they don't benefit from it, they can. We just need to see more females included in studies like this to get a true, I guess, percentage number of improvement over the course of time and taking it. So like always, research needs to be done in this space on females.
Yeah, I agree with that. I can't see from a physiological point of view why they shouldn't, but that research needs to prove it, doesn't it?
Yep, exactly right. And I think that's probably, we've made this sort of bold claim that you can put on, 25 pounds of strength over that period of time. It's just hard to say, will females be able to do that? That's why that research is needed to make it clear, to give us a really clear number on the benefit. So that's that's really good in terms of resistance training. Now, anaerobic power-based sports, I did pull, it was probably, to be honest, strangely a bit harder to find the anaerobic papers in terms of, say, like a high intensity interval training study or other CrossFit, so to speak. So what I did find was creatine supplementation in soccer players, because it's an anaerobic sport. It's been looked at quite extensively. So this paper was a 2019 meta-analysis and systematic review on the creatine use, once again, compared to placebo in soccer players. Now, soccer players have got this unique blend, much like AFL players. They've got this unique blend of having to run around for 90 to 120 minutes, but also have got really sharp, sudden passages of play where they've just got to go all out for 1 to 2 minutes at such a high intensity, but they've also got really explosive actions to perform on a regular basis. So what was clear in this paper was that the aerobic endurance of the soccer players, when they looked at some of the testing and the testing results, it didn't have an effect on aerobic-based tests, which kind of sits with what we currently know in our current evidence base. Single explosive actions, such as the ability to maximally jump, so a counter movement jump, vertical jump, short sprint time, there was a very small but not non-significant trend towards a benefit in our soccer players. But the biggest bang for buck, and where creatine scored, please excuse the pun, was in the anaerobic performance measures. So measures of repeated sprint ability, measures of, so there's a common test that's often used in sports science circles called the Wingate test. And it's a repeated run test, and it measures that anaerobic performance. And this was where the significant gains were seen in our soccer players. So this was a really powerful study and look, we've got to be careful to generalize some of these things that are found in a specific population. So we're looking at male soccer players here in particular, but you think about sports like basketball, like AFL, where yes, they are largely long games of sport, but there's always moments in all those activities where there are bursts of really brutal repeated sprint efforts or jumping efforts. And so that's where the wins are being seen. So this is a really clear standout for if you're an athlete in a sport like soccer, you'll get some wins here.
And I think that they're from a performance point of view and from a winning a game point of view, like they're the things that matter. You know, we're in Australia, so you think about AFL football, you know, that time that you just surge to kind of spoil a mark or something like that, where it's coming in late in the game, or you're a soccer player and, you know, it's like you can just have that little messy burst of speed, you know, just to kind of get through and weave through two players just to kind of kick the goal. I like to think of creatine as the afterburners.
Yes.
You take
Yep.
creatine, like whether it comes to the resistance stuff that we've been talking about, allows you just to get that extra rep or two. Or when it comes to these explosive ballistic kind of movements in field sports and that kind of thing,
Yep.
those are the things that make the difference in
Yep.
sport.
Yeah, and it may be hard, like anything. You may not be able to, and this is where I guess like the science is always really interesting, and the researchers are all done in, you know, take intervention A, you go off and they live their lives, do their thing, particularly soccer players, they go off and, you know, come back, and then they come back into this very sterile environment and they have a test that they have to do that's a valid and reliable test to say, has there been a benefit? But that test is going to be so far different to that passage of play that will potentially be the difference between winning a game and losing a game. So sometimes that test doesn't correlate to that on-field activity that will make a difference in the whole scheme of things. That's why it can be really, really hard to define, will this be beneficial for your sport? But if you sort of take the kind of bird's eye view and go, okay, well, if I'm going to take creatine and if I know that I can repeat my sprint efforts over and over again, if I take creatine, I know that I can now be physically stronger, and I know if I got greater muscle mass, that will equate to being able to jump higher, or I'll be able to take off that little bit quicker. And that's going to ultimately benefit me on the field and my performances. Then that's obviously got to be a win, right? And especially if there's no downside, there's no physical harms taking it. I just don't see it as a waste of time. I think
I couldn't agree more. Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And I think that, we always talk about the evidence and that we're always looking, in this podcast, we will present the evidence. But sometimes, particularly when you're a high level athlete of any kind, even if you're a master's athlete, you just want to swim fast, for instance, evidence-based stuff can also be what works for you.
Yes.
And if in the case of creatine, for instance, like if you have an athlete that takes it and it says, it's allowed me to do that, I know it. I feel like I just that little bit more explosive out on the field because I've taken it and there's no harm for it. It's like, take it, do it,
Yep. Yep.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And I think this is probably what leans into the next point, talking about its use in endurance athletes, because the evidence for endurance athletes it isn't there, to be honest, from what I've found. So a systematic review looking at, creatine supplementation now, endurance-based athletes, it actually says it's not helpful at all, particularly in our running athletes, where the feeling is that the weight gain, we talked about weight gain, how it can fill your muscles up, particularly running athletes, that heaviness, that 1 to 2 kilos of extra weight for a running endurance athlete can potentially be detrimental to their running performance. That has been talked about in this systematic review. So this systematic review was 13 randomized control trials, including 277 trained participants, looking at commonly used endurance tests like time trials, time to exhaustion tests, VO2 max tests, and threshold tests across running, cycling, rowing, and swimming. And they compared athletes who were taking creatine to those taking a placebo. So yeah, it was the creatine group didn't show a significant effect on endurance performance in these trained populations, although the size was calculated as actually negative and actually detrimental. So there was certainly, from a performance point of view, it was detrimental. But the caveat to this is that there actually was a benefit seen in the rowing population. So this was quite interesting, because the rowers are seen to have this really combined mix of both that endurance, or depending on, I guess how the length of the row is, but we're looking at the endurance-based distances. But they've got this nice blending of both muscular strength and aerobic endurance. And in this context in particular, it was seen to be beneficial to a rowing group of athletes. But what you were saying before, and this is what the authors comment on in this systematic review, was that where, even though it wasn't across the board seen to be beneficial, where the benefits were seen in those athletes that need to surge. So if you're an endurance runner, say you're a marathon runner and you have to surge for that last 1 or 2K, you've got that energy stock in you. Cyclists as well, swimmers, where you've got that need to push hard and come home strong. That's where the theory is, even though the evidence may not support it, but the theory there, because how creatine works within the body, the theory is there to explain why these athletes can and should take it. But the message was being careful with our weight-bearing athletes, so our runners, our walkers, where that extra bit of weight gain could potentially weigh them down, so to speak. Even though it may allow them to surge, our non-weight bearing athletes, our cyclists, our swimmers, our rowers, they were seen to probably have a better likelihood of taking it a bit more successfully, because they don't rely so much on their body weight against the ground as they're walking. So, as they're moving. An interesting polarizing topic there with our endurance-based athletes and the use of creatine. I think, like you said, it's kind of one of those things that if the person sitting right in front of you has seen and felt that experience and seen the benefit, then there's certainly no harm in taking it.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
And all that reflects my anecdotal experience as well, is that endurance athletes generally, particularly the weight-bearing ones, just do not like creatine, because even if they do understand that it might be able to help their surge ability just that bit, even if they're just, increasing their body weight by 1 kilogram because of all the water that's stored in the muscles, they won't, the trade-off's not worth it.
Yep, exactly right. All right, we're just pushing on a little bit too late. I'm going to wrap this up fairly quickly. Lastly, we've got brain health. So we've got a nice little review here on looking at creatine and brain health. This is a nice systematic review. Once again, 16 studies made the final cut for this particular review. 2024 review as well, so very recent, nearing nearly 500 adults ranging from 21 to 76, taking creatine versus a placebo for as little as 2 weeks and longer than 4. Looking specifically at brain health, the clear wins for creatine were seen in memory. So the ability to recall and memory function, the evidence was very significant, and the quality of evidence across the board in those papers looked at was of a moderate quality. So the papers often get divided into low, moderate, and high. So moderate quality evidence with a significant impact on memory, which was good. Attention time was also significantly better in the creatine group, and processing speed as well across different populations. So healthy people as well as people with some mild cognitive decline in our older populations as well, because there was a big range there, 21 to 76. We're going to see a lot of people there in that group, and obviously as we get older, some of our memory processing and our cognitive starts to decline. To see some really positive impacts on memory, attention time, and processing speed was wonderful. Where it didn't sort of show really clear benefits were seen in our overall cognitive function, executive functions, and processing speeds. The evidence is still very, thin in those spaces, and the evidence generally in this space is emerging. So watch this space, but there's definitely some brewing evidence there about the benefits of creatine and mental health and brain health, which is.
And generally, Mick, is it thought that in the research that the mechanism behind that is basically that the creatine is allowing that little bit more ATP and energy to the neural tissues as well, which will just improve those select neural functions? Is that the physiological way it's working?
The authors in this paper definitely suggested that creatine, its thinking is that just that increasing energy supply. We know that the ATP, how creatine acts and works with ATP, energy releasing. Yes, it helps skeletal muscle, but we heard about it before that it also is stored in the brain and helps support the brain. So it's supplying energy to the brain. It's also helping and enhancing neurotransmitter processes across the brain and allowing nerves to communicate better. Also to reducing oxidative stress as well has been shown to be a biological process of the creatine. So that's where we're thinking how it works. Lastly, before we wrap things up, recommended dosages. So back in the day, I was told that I needed to absolutely, swamp my body full of creatine and absolutely overload my body with a high loading dose, so to speak. The thinking of that has probably changed a little bit. There's some recommendations that some athletes may need that loading dose, and males and females may differ a little bit between loading or not loading. It really is a case-by-case basis, but there is really no clear evidence that you are to load or not load. But if you are to load, because it is saturating our muscle stores better and quicker. So for 5 to 7 days, the thinking is that we overload our system with about 5 grams taken 4 times a day for a 5 to 7 day period. So a fairly high dose in that loading phase, and maintaining it with 3 to 5 grams per day onwards. Okay, so that's our loading strategy if we want to do that. Alternative to loading, we could simply just go at a maintenance dose and make sure we take it ongoing for our period of lifting or physical activity or however long we're taking it. So alternatives to loading is that we consume 3 to 5 grams of creatine daily to increase our creatine stores. But it takes a longer time to reach that saturation point. For brain health, the recommendation is that some researchers are suggesting that we take higher doses of about 20 grams a day for 7 days and then maintain at about 5 grams a day. Females, looking at our female population in general, not just brain health or just resistance training, but females, from the small amount of evidence that we do have there, is that may benefit from consistent daily intake of about 3 to 5 grams a day in an ongoing fashion. With the comment being here is that it's due to their lower baseline stores as they currently sit. It's a bit messy, I guess, in terms of loading, whether or not you load or you don't load. My gut feel from what I've read is that athletes and people that are heavy weight training probably would benefit from some kind of loading to get their muscles up to a saturation point, especially if maybe they have a competition or they've got an event that they're training for and they want to start seeing those benefits in their strength and power development happen a little bit sooner. There's probably some benefit there of loading up and then dropping into a maintenance phase. Conversely, those that are maybe just training for general life, for bone density, muscle skeletal mass maintenance, brain health, there's probably no rush in getting that saturation point with our creatine. So you best kick off with a 3 to 5 grams per day and maintain it for as long as you like.
There's some really good guidelines in there, Mick. And while you're talking a little bit earlier, just to steal kind of like your follow-up thunder, I did have a quick look online about how much creatine is in certain foods. So
Yes.
apparently to kind of, we've been talking about that maintenance dose is about 5 grams or so.
Yeah.
You need to eat a kilogram of red meat to get
Whoa.
5 grams of creatine. So if you're, and that's on top of, remember, like your standard diet, this is a supplement. So the answer, I think, is that you can probably eat enough creatine if you want to build muscle, but it would have to be an enormous amount.
That's a lot of meat. I can't get through, like, I'd struggle to get through a 400 gram steak some days. I know some, like, big blokes and big meat eaters would just go, oh, that's easy, I could do that. But I could find, I'm not sure what you're like, but, I think 300, 400 gram steaks are probably the most that most people could tackle.
I'm sure they serve some pretty big steaks up in Townsville, don't they, Mick?
We do. We've got some good steakhouses up here, mate. When you come up to visit, I'll take you to a couple.
I'm just waiting for the invite. So, all right. Well, I think that's it. Awesome. Do you want to read us out, mate? Well done on that episode.
Yeah, I better
really
go
good.
I better get my notes because I'm not professional and we haven't remembered our lines yet. But it was a great chat. Thanks very much for joining me on this one. But that's a wrap as always for this episode. If you enjoyed this chat, make sure to subscribe, leave a review and share it with your mates. A quick disclaimer that this podcast is for educational purposes only and is not medical or individual advice. Always seek guidance from a qualified health professional for your specific needs. A big thanks to our sponsors, Premax, high-performance skincare for high-performance people, and Learn.physio, world-class education for health professionals. We'll catch you next time.
See you next time.